Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
The sudden death of her husband was an unexpected and terrible stroke for Natalia Gimenez. Bolívar Valiente went to the market to buy homemade sour cream and fresh fish, as he usually did on Sundays. He loved when his wife grilled fish in an oil sauce. Natalia was happy to do it to please her husband. Natalia kept replaying the events of the fateful day in her head in a futile attempt to understand why she had missed the alarming symptoms and signs of impending disaster, but she could not recall anything suspicious. Everything was fine that morning. Even their blood pressure was perfect, even though they often experienced such problems. Her husband joked when he saw the number on the screen. "I'm so healthy that I'm ready to travel into outer space." Then he got ready, left, and when he came back, he brought groceries into the kitchen and asked, "Natalia, make some mashed potatoes for the fish." There was nothing unusual in this request either. Natalia always cooked potatoes with sour cream as a side dish for fish. The woman was doing her usual chores with the TV on, and the TV was very quiet. She could have sworn that no cries for help came from the room her husband was in. However, when she entered the room to call her husband to the table, there was no reaction from him. Natalia stepped closer. Her husband was sitting in an armchair as if he were just asleep. Touching his shoulder, she realized that something terrible had happened. However, even the ambulance team, which arrived very quickly, couldn't save Bolívar. The woman was in a strange stupor, answering the questions, and it seemed as if both her common sense and her eyes had failed. She was desperately trying to find the papers, shoveling everything from the shelves, until a broad-shouldered nurse gently touched her by the shoulder. "Excuse me, but I think you just dropped the necessary papers on the floor." Natalia came to her senses and saw, indeed, everything she needed was on the floor. The doctor, uttering words of sympathy, offered the confused woman, "I understand that this is a hard time for you. You have to organize a funeral. Let me send you a reliable person who will do everything at a reasonable cost." Natalia Gimenez agreed because she had no idea where to start. It seemed to the widow that the representative of the funeral agency arrived about 10 minutes after the doctors had left. And that lady started the conversation with a few polite phrases, appropriate to the sad occasion. Immersed in sadness, the widowed woman invited her to the kitchen. And she didn't even notice that the businesslike lady looked around the apartment and sighed indulgently. An experienced employee of the funeral agency realized that she would not earn much in this case. She was even a little angry at the doctor who had sent her information about the deceased man. Natalia didn't understand the visitor's words and everything that was going on around her. The widow answered clarifying questions, then heard the cost of organizing the farewell ceremony, and immediately gave the entire amount in cash. The lady slipped her some papers, either contracts or receipts, and the widow, without reading or even trying to understand anything, put everything required on the table, where Bolívar's favorite fish and potatoes and sour cream had already gotten cold. At this point, Natalia burst into tears. Her husband no longer needed his favorite food. And now it was painful for her to look at it. The sight of the cold dinner caused more tears, and she hurriedly put everything in the refrigerator. The lady from the funeral agency looked displeased. It was unpleasant for her to look at the crying relatives of the deceased. She was calculating her profits, and the negative emotions from outside were preventing her from enjoying the planning of what she could afford. She expressed fake sympathy once again and said, "Natalia Gimenez, don't worry. We will organize a decent farewell ceremony. We have a very nice hall for farewell. And I can recommend a cheap canteen for a farewell dinner. I'll leave you my business card. It has my office number and my cell phone number. Call me if there is anything else you need to clarify." Soon she left, and Natalia was left alone. Sad events swirled an endless maelstrom of chores, and she tried very hard as if her diligence could fix what had happened. After ironing the clean sheets, the woman began to clean the rooms. Even though she was not too old, she felt like a very old woman at 56 because of her insomnia. And it was very hard for her to clean the apartment. For some reason, it was very important to Natalia that no one says the apartment wasn't clean when they came to say a final goodbye to Bolívar. Natalia had prepared beds to accommodate her children and granddaughter in case they decided to stay with her for a few days. However, both daughter Alina and son Vasco found reason to only show up for the farewell ceremony. "I'm actually on a business trip," Vasco answered. "I can't get away from here, otherwise, a big project could go wrong. I'll come to you as soon as I get off the plane." Natalia swallowed the lump in her throat from her resentment for Bolívar. She wished the grown-up child a safe journey and hung up. Talking to her daughter made her bad mood even worse. "Oh, it's not the best time," Alina muttered. "Milu broke up with her boyfriend. She's crying all the time, day and night, and it's not good for her condition. I didn't tell you before, but she's pregnant, and now we have to solve this problem somehow. I'm afraid she'll do something to herself, God forbid. I'm so confused, I don't know what to do. Anyway, I'll figure something out. By the way, don't you want me to send you some money?" Natalia, shocked to hear the news about her granddaughter, whispered. "No, Alina. We had savings, don't worry. Give Milu a hug from me. Goodbye." Natalia understood that even their dear granddaughter would not come to the funeral. Bolívar loved her so much. A call to Vasco's ex-wife didn't bring any results either. The woman who was mad at all of her former relatives didn't even pick up the phone. After calling all the other contacts on the list from her and her late husband's phone, Natalia felt really unwell. One of her neighbors, who stopped by to express sympathy, noticed that something was wrong. She even called a doctor. A tired doctor came in the evening and after a brief questioning and examination prescribed some medicine and gave her advice. "You should get some sleep. But I understand that it is easier to say than to do. In general, take the prescribed medication and make an appointment in a week, okay?" The widow nodded. When she was closing the door behind the doctor, she met the neighbors. They wanted to comfort Natalia and said that Bolívar had passed away without suffering as if he were a saint. She could not believe she was nodding in response to these words. She still didn't want to believe that she was left alone. She had children and a granddaughter, but now she suddenly realized that she could not rely on them. She was frightened to realize that she had children, and yet, she was all alone. Natalia left the apartment and slowly made her way to the nearest pharmacy. Once again, she was struck by the blatant unfairness of life. Outside, everything looked as if nothing had happened. People were walking, cars were driving. Nothing has changed in the world, but her world has collapsed. The pills prescribed by the doctor had dulled her pain a bit, but insomnia had not disappeared. The woman tried to live an ordinary life, but she did everything automatically, as if her mind was in a fog. There were no thoughts in her head. There were flashes of some faces, someone said something, and Natalia even responded. But in a few minutes, she couldn't remember what she was talking about, or who she was talking to. When Alina and Vasco finally arrived, everything was ready for their father's last farewell. Granddaughter Milu could not come. And for the first time, Natalia Gimenez felt an emotion other than muffled grief, so she worriedly asked, "Is Milu all right? Is there someone to look after her?" Alina said, "Don't worry." Her boyfriend came to her again with apologies and chocolate cake. You know how Milu loves chocolate, so she forgave him everything. So she's in love and happy again. But I told her not to come here. The negative emotions are not good for her right now. Natalia obediently agreed. Yes, I guess it's the right decision. If she gets nervous, she might have problems with the baby. It's better to be careful. Bolívar would probably understand his granddaughter and would even try to keep her from sad ceremonies. Even the worst events come to an end at some point. Thus, Bolívar's funeral was over. Neighbors, friends, and relatives slowly left the cafe, and after the funeral dinner Natalia, Vasco, and Alina returned home. The tired widow refused to have coffee with her children and went to get some rest. She thought she would fall asleep in a second, but the dream stubbornly refused to envelop the woman in life-saving relaxation. While she was busy with funeral arrangements, she was somehow distracted. But now precious memories seized her. As she thought with a smile about her first kiss with her husband, she even managed to fall asleep. But suddenly loud voices woke her up. At first, it was almost shouting, but then the voices became quiet again. Involuntarily Natalia Gimenez began to listen. After a few phrases she wanted to wake up. She wished that this disgusting conversation had turned out to be just a nightmare. But she was awake. Alina spoke loudly, clearly, and very convincingly. She got her leadership position thanks to her speaking skills. And her daughter was saying something that Natalia could not believe. Now I have to think about where my daughter is going to live. Her boyfriend is going to live in my house, and he has no house and no money. I don't want Milu to be nervous now. I think they should move into this apartment, it would be perfect. A voice that sounded a lot like the voice of her dear son Vasco also said some strange phrases. Sister, you want too much. Your daughter gets this apartment, and what do I get? You know that after the divorce process, I live in such a crap place that I can't even invite a woman there. So let's make it fair. Natalia was waiting with horror to see what Alina would say. And she heard an ingratiating speech with very unpleasant meaning. Vasco, I know that your situation is not easy either. I understand. Even though you are a normal man, as long as you live in such a crappy place, only an alcoholic or a homeless woman would agree to date you. Do you have any ideas about what to do with this apartment? Natalia's heart was beating frantically, but her son's answer did not please her. I think the only fair way to divide the property would be to sell the apartment and divide the money into 3 parts. But the money each of us would get wouldn't even be enough to buy a tiny room. But you and I will at least get the money. And where will our mother go? I'd put her in a nursing home. How do you think? Can we talk her into it? Alina raised her voice, trying to convince her brother. Actually, she has no rights to this apartment. Our father bought it before he married her. So if we do it right, you and I will be the first priority heirs. Vasco's voice had a hint of joyful relief at having suddenly found a way out of a difficult situation. And he was trying to find a noble justification for an unfair, mean decision. You're right. Why would she need such a big apartment? She is alone now. And if we sell it and divide the money, no one will get anything good. Alina, I remember that she had some relatives somewhere in the countryside. We need to try to turn the conversation in such a way that eventually she will suggest this idea and not me or you. In fact, it would be better for her there. Clean fresh air, organic food, no city noise. That's right, Vasco. She must go to the village. It will be better for everyone. It's easier to divide an apartment between 2 people, Alina laughed evilly. Natalia couldn't believe her ears. She had gone through so much pain for the sake of her children. And now, a few decades later, instead of love and care, she will receive such disgusting gratitude in return. Her heart raced, it was hard to breathe, and her temples throbbed. The woman knew what this symptom was. Reaching for the nightstand, she quickly took a pill under her tongue to lower her blood pressure. The noise gradually subsided, both behind the wall and in her ears. Natalia tried to take deep breaths but felt she was desperately short of oxygen. The woman had experienced this before, but she was much younger then. Many years ago, a very young Natalia, following other children, hurried home from school in a neighboring village, taking the shortcut across the river. Everyone had managed to leave the dangerous ice floe and was standing on the shore, but she hesitated for a few moments. Those seconds were enough for the ice to suddenly crunch. Natalia didn't even have time to get frightened, she just felt the intense burning cold. The next moment, the water closed over her head. Water began to fill her body. Probably, the fact that she had survived was just a coincidence of fortunate factors. However, for the rest of her life Natalia, reflecting on what had happened, was convinced that her salvation was a miracle. There was no other way she could explain what had happened. The first luck was the fact that everything happened almost on the shore. And when her feet reached the bottom, her head was above the water. The second thing was the ingenuity of her older sister Lucila and her classmates. They managed to find a thick branch almost instantly and stretch it out to her. Fortunately, the current was not strong. So, holding on to the branch, she made her way ashore, frightened, and instantly frozen to the bones. Her sister immediately started rescuing her sister on the shore. "Natalia, take off your wet clothes and shoes right now. Boys, turn around, don't look." Lucila took off her coat and wrapped it around Natalia, who could not take off her wet boots. One of the girls put a scarf over her head and the boys helped her take off her shoes. Her classmate Conrado wrapped his scarf around her feet. Suddenly Lucila nervously bit her lip to the point of bleeding and became confused. At this point, Vital took charge of the rescue operation. He was in high school with Lucila. He quickly took off his coat, took the nearly drowned girl in his arms, and said, "All right, Lucila, put my coat on you now." Conrado wrapped the scarf around Natalia's feet even more tightly, and "Everyone follow me. We need to get to the village as quickly as possible. Whoever comes first, tell the parents, so that they can meet us." The children silently ran forward, and only the older boys talked to each other from time to time and helped Virgilio. Years later, Natalia thought that everyone who had helped her on that fateful day had done a heroic deed. The children knew that they would be punished by their parents, who had strictly forbidden them to walk across the river in the spring, but they were not afraid to ask adults for help. An old car driven by Lucila and Natalia's grandfather met them halfway to the village. Fortunately, the man was at the farmhouse, which was just on the riverside. And when he heard the confused explanations of the frightened children, he did not hesitate for a second and drove the car toward his granddaughter. Virgilio, who was carrying Natalia, carefully put her in the car. The frightened children jumped into the car and became quiet. The man drove quickly and soon brought his granddaughter into the house, where her mother Anna was already waiting for them. They did not scold Natalia, because she was the victim, but all the other children were punished after their parents found out all the details of the incident. Her classmates often visited her. Conrado was the most frequent visitor. Since Natalia didn't go to school for a while, her older sister had to tutor her at home. But Conrado was happy to do it instead of her. He also brought the girl her homework and took the homework papers to school to be checked. Natalia was sick for a long time. And then she went back to school. Thanks to Conrado's visits, the girl kept up with the program and confidently passed her exams at the end of the year. The teacher sincerely praised both the girl and her helper. "Well done. It is wonderful that you are friends and always help those who have difficulties. Stay as friendly and kind as you are, and you will do well in life." Everything was going well with her studies, but, as it turned out later, swimming in ice-cold water affected her health. Natalia managed to survive, but the accident had very unpleasant consequences. It all came out when she was already married. Simeon, the boy from the neighboring village, proposed to the 18-year-old Natalia. The girl agreed, even though she didn't even like him. She just wanted to keep up with her friends, who quickly said goodbye to freedom and already had husbands and children. Soon Simeon and Natalia got married. She always thought of her first experience of married life with a shiver. Her husband never argued with his strict mother, and her mother-in-law felt like a full-fledged mistress who got a new servant. Natalia worked very hard from dawn until dusk, doing absolutely all the housework. And during the breaks, she raced around the village working as an insurance agent. Her mother-in-law forced her to take this job. Natalia was ashamed to complain to her mother and sister, and she silently endured even the most unfair reproaches. Years later, the woman bitterly thought she had wasted her youth trying to please people who didn't care about her. It seemed that all Simeon cared about was that his mother was happy, that there was always a delicious hearty meal, and that his clothes were always clean and tidy. If he was in a good mood, he would try to distract his wife from troubles by inviting her to the club. And when he wasn't in the mood, he didn't care about anything. Sometimes Natalia would complain to her husband that his mother humiliated and abused her, but he would only say indifferently, "What the hell are you talking about? You're just bored because you have too much spare time. I don't know, find yourself some hobby." It was as if Simeon didn't even notice that his wife was running around like a squirrel in a wheel, doing all the housework, even some of the typical men's work. Her mother-in-law grumbled at Natalia, but noticing her industriousness, she gradually burdened her with new responsibilities. Things could be fine, but Simeon's mother was concerned about the fact that she had no grandchildren. The mother-in-law began to blame Natalia for her health problems. Apparently, the grumpy woman didn't expect the patience of her tireless, shy, and almost speechless daughter-in-law to run out. After 5 years of living in her mother-in-law's house, bursting into bitter tears and carrying a half-empty suitcase, Natalia returned to her mother. After calming her daughter down, Anna heard a sad confession. "My mother-in-law kept asking me why we couldn't please her with a grandchild. I kept saying that everything is okay, we just need time, but a month ago she took me to a doctor she knows in the city. She sent me for a full examination. Yesterday I went to the hospital again. The doctor told me that I have no chance to be a mother. When I came home, my mother-in-law was aware of my sad situation. My packed suitcase was already in the hallway. My husband also walked around the house gloomily. I realized everything myself. He doesn't need someone like me. I said that I would file for divorce myself and came here." Natalia burst into tears again. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering words of comfort to her. Lucila, who had heard the end of the bitter conversation, rushed over to them almost immediately. "Don't cry. Neither your husband nor your angry mother-in-law is worth a tear. It is very good that you came back to us." After the divorce, Natalia considered herself defective even though her mother and sister tried to convince her the opposite. However, some of the local gossip mongers, who were relatives or friends of her former mother-in-law, often added fuel to the fire. When they saw Natalia passing by, they began to loudly discuss childbearing matters. Soon, almost the entire village was aware of her problem, but this didn't reduce her popularity among the men. Many men liked the pretty, hardworking young girl, whose eyes always looked sad. Many young guys asked her out on dates. Some of them did it confidently and boldly, some modestly and shyly. But Natalia refused everyone who tried to approach her. And soon there was almost no one left who wanted to try their luck. Even stubborn Virgilio switched to courting Lucila. Only a grown-up former classmate Conrado, who returned from the army and got a job in their village, still tried to get at least a tender look or a smile from an old acquaintance when he met her. In the spring and fall, he would give her flowers and fruit he picked in the woods. And in the summertime, he pleased her with wild strawberries. Lucila wanted her sister to be happy. She saw that Conrado was sincere, that he had real feelings for Natalia, and she told her sister, "Natalia, don't be silly. Conrado is a great guy. He's hardworking, he doesn't drink, he's reliable. And people say he's going to build a house. You can see he treats you well. Who helped us with our vegetable garden free of charge? Conrado. He treats us with respect. What else do you want?" Natalia heard her sister say this many times, and she always answered, "He won't be happy with me, I won't be able to give him a child. I know that Conrado is a great guy, that's why I don't want to ruin his life. I'd be happy if you married him. That way both of you would be happy." Lucila was angry and answered that she already dated Vital. Every time after a conversation like that, the sisters would shut up and think about that terrible day when Natalia had fallen into the icy water. The mother, seeing her daughter suffering, tried to persuade her to see another doctor. Pressing her daughter's head to her heart, Anna whispered, "Natalia, you shouldn't give up. Maybe the doctors made a mistake or even turned it that way because of bad intentions. Anyway, go somewhere else, at least to the city hospital. Let them check everything again. You will take medication. Maybe we can overcome the damn disease." A few years later, Natalia followed her mother's advice. During her vacation, she went to the capital and visited many doctors. But unfortunately, she heard the same conclusion. She knew what she was going to hear, but still, she was shocked. It was as if her mind was in a fog. She walked around the city, bought everything her family asked for, and then decided to take a risk. Now Natalia would not have believed the conversation she heard in the hospital about the witch doctor. But years ago she wanted to hear the long-awaited "everything will be fine." Today she felt ashamed to think about it, but years ago she took the address of the witch doctor and visited her. She only had money left for the return trip, but she paid for a cup of the allegedly miraculous potion. Natalia drank the potion, which tasted like mint and raspberry, and wanted to believe that soon her life would change. The witch doctor, seeing her visitor off, made one last promise. "You will definitely have a husband and children. Go, and don't lose faith." Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe not, but the witch doctor's potion worked. That same day, trying to hitch a ride home, Natalia met Bolívar. A huge truck stopped near Natalia, standing on the side of the road with her hand raised. The attractive driver asked where the girl was going and helped her get into the truck. "You are lucky my route goes right by your village," Natalia shyly said. "But I have no money at all. I can offer you a homemade sandwich. It's very tasty." The man only laughed. "Don't worry about it, I'll take you there for free. It's always easier to drive when you have someone to talk to." He helped her put her bags in the truck, and soon they were driving down the highway. At first, Natalia was shy and answered all the questions of the talkative man quietly and briefly. However, soon she felt comfortable and relaxed. The driver's name was Bolívar. For some reason, she felt she could trust him, and when they gradually shifted to the topic of family, she unexpectedly told him all about her divorce and her infertility. The woman didn't feel uncomfortable talking to the man. Perhaps the magic of the accidental traveling companions worked when you suddenly open your soul to a total stranger. Natalia was sure that Bolívar would drive her to her village and she would never see him again. So she told him, "The doctors told me that I could never be a mother. There is no chance." The man was silent for a while. And then he said, "Well, sometimes life brings us not only joy but also difficulties. For example, I have 2 children. My daughter Alina is 13, and my son Vasco is only 10. And they don't have a mother. Well, actually they have a mother, but we haven't seen her in almost half a year. She met another man and moved in with him and forgot about the children." The driver turned to Natalia. "I can't even blame her. I'm often away from home because of work, and she's a young and beautiful woman. So she couldn't stand the constant separation. When she met a man richer than me, she suddenly decided that our marriage and our children were a mistake. There was nothing I could do. Now I'm a single father. But that's okay, I can handle it. Unfortunately, I earn even less now, because I can't be on the road all the time. I have to fulfill the duties of both father and mother. But I can't quit my job either, otherwise, we would starve. While I'm on the road, the neighbors babysit the kids. That's how we live now." Natalia, trying to find the right words, wanted to express sympathy, but Bolívar tried to change the subject of the conversation and asked, "By the way, pardon my curiosity and strange question, but how did you carry such heavy bags to the road?" "They are incredibly heavy. Even I could hardly lift them." The woman, who almost had tears in the corner of her eyes, smiled at this exaggeration, saying, "The military guy helped me to bring the bags to the bus stop. And then I slowly dragged everything to the highway. I dragged 2 bags, put them, and came back for the others. That's how I got there." Bolívar listened to his companion and asked, "Is the road to your house normal? Will a truck get through?" Natalia answered, "Yes, we are lucky with that. The house is on the corner of the main street, so the road is paved." The new friends spent the rest of the journey having pleasant conversations. And then she saw the turnoff to her village. She planned to get off at the corner, walk to the house, and drag the heavy bags somehow. But when Natalia told Bolívar to stop, he suddenly turned the wheel, and the huge truck soon drove into the village. The driver helped his companion to get out of the truck and carried the bags to the gate, joking about their weight, but flatly refused to have lunch. "Thank you, but I have to drive. I have to deliver the cargo on time. Besides, my children are waiting for me." Natalia's mother and sister, who heard the truck pull up to the house, walked out to the porch. But the massive truck had already turned around, and they did not have time to see who was behind the wheel. Anna and Lucila helped Natalia bring the bags inside. Natalia lowered her eyes, and her mother understood. The verdict was still the same. Making a sign to her older daughter not to ask her sister about anything, Anna began to set the table, saying, "Girls, unpack the bags, and I'll be back in a moment." Natalia, exhausted from the doctor's appointments and shopping, tried to refuse lunch. But it was useless to argue with her mother. She thought she couldn't force herself to eat even a bite, but the smell of delicious homemade food made her wildly hungry. When the women were enjoying their coffee, the villagers came to their house to pick up the things they had ordered. The house became noisy as if there was some celebration. Natalia suddenly felt calm and even cheerful. Someone was trying on shoes and clothes, someone was sharing sweets that were not sold in the village. Suddenly, curious neighbor Simplicia asked, "Natalia, who drove you home?" "I was working in the garden and heard the car engine. Then I saw a man helping you. Handsome and tall. And he is not old at all." The villagers joked about Simplicia. She always complained that she had a hearing problem and could hardly see anything. However, she always saw and heard everything interesting. Then Natalia answered the question. "I ended up out of money, and I couldn't buy a bus ticket. But I was very lucky. A truck driver gave me a ride. He joked that the bags weighed more than me. A few hours later, relatives and neighbors left Anna's house, wishing her and her daughters good night. And an exhausted Natalia finally made her way to bed. In her dreams, she saw Bolívar, and they were driving somewhere together again. And in the morning during breakfast, she realized that her mother and sister had already discussed her new friend. And they started asking her about everything. Lucila straightforwardly clarified. I wonder what plans Bolívar has for the future. The children are teenagers, they need someone to take care of them. He should change his job so he can look after them. Anna could see that her eldest daughter's insistence made Natalia uncomfortable. And the conversation between the girls was about to turn into a quarrel. The woman tried to calm them down. Girls, come on, there is nothing to talk about. The man helped Natalia to get home, it was noble and we are grateful to him. But there is no point in talking about his future and his children. We won't see him again anyway, so we won't be able to share our valuable ideas. However, Anna was wrong. Bolívar showed up at her house about 2 months later. When he knocked on the gate, he saw how surprised Anna was and explained the reason for his visit. Sorry for the unexpected visit. I recently drove through your village. You must be Natalia's mother. The woman nodded and waited cautiously for what Bolívar would tell her. He didn't wait long and confessed. I was passing by your village today and my truck broke down in such a way that I could not cope with it myself. I need a spare part. I called a friend, he'll bring everything I need, but only late at night. I wanted to wait at some cafe, but the village is so small that there is no cafe or even a coffee machine. I didn't want to bother you, but I don't know anyone else here. I wanted to ask you for some hot tea or coffee, and then I'll leave. Soon Natalia came home from work. Anna told her that Bolívar had stopped by, she offered him lunch, and after eating he came back to his truck. Natalia got excited. Should I bring him something else? It's already evening, and it's cold outside. And he must be very hungry, we should offer him dinner. Natalia warmed up dinner and headed for the truck, and Anna looked worriedly at her daughter. She was over 25, and it was time for her to get married. But Anna didn't want her daughter to start a relationship with a truck driver. He's always traveling around the country, he probably has a girlfriend in every village. Besides, Bolívar had children to raise and support. Anna realized that if anything happened, all the burden would fall on her daughter's frail shoulders. There was hope that the driver didn't like his traveling companion, but the woman's heart was beating anxiously. And something Anna feared had happened. Natalia and Bolívar started dating. The man had no time for a romantic courtship, but he often stopped by, bringing some goods that were impossible to buy in their small village and helping out around the house doing men's work. So it was no surprise to anyone when Bolívar asked Natalia to marry him. Anna didn't try to prevent it, knowing that it would only make things worse for her daughter who was in love. She even suggested that Natalia move in with her fiancé and live in his house for a while without getting married. Sweetheart, try to live with Bolívar as a fiancé, not as a wife. Get to know his children and see if they accept you as a family member. Lucila was also against her sister's quick marriage. She claimed flatly, waving her hands. You're just a convenient option for him. While he is away on his trips, you will clean the apartment, cook dinner, and take care of his children. You will drive them to school, do the laundry for them, and treat them if they get sick. What if they don't accept you as part of the family? Then you would be their number one enemy, your life would turn into a nightmare. Mom's right. At least meet them first, and stay with them for at least a week. After saying the last goodbye to her husband, who did not pay much attention to her, but still treated her with respect, and remembering life with him, Natalia Gimenez realized that her mother and sister were absolutely right. However, years ago she didn't listen to anyone and immediately agreed to live with her husband and his 2 children, not thinking about the difficulties ahead. The worst part was that Bolivar City was not close to Natalia's village, so she couldn't visit her family very often. Cellular communication was still very poor at that time, and the woman had no chance to talk to her mother and sister. Moreover, she had almost no free time. Bolívar understood that he could trust Natalia and stayed at home only for a short honeymoon, shortened to 2 weeks. Even on their honeymoon, they were rarely alone, his children were always with them. He wanted Natalia to spend more time with his children and make friends with them. Afterward, he was almost always away on trips, and Natalia had to be both mother and father to his children. When Bolívar was at home, Alina and Vasco behaved indifferently with their stepmother. But the very first time Bolívar left, as soon as the door closed behind the man, the girl said, "Don't even think of taking our mother's place. You are just a servant, nothing more." Natalia didn't try to impose her friendship and didn't bother the children with unnecessary conversations. She understood that it was not easy for the teenagers to accept her in their family. But she tried very hard to be helpful. However, teenagers responded with animal rage and constantly mocked her. They did disgusting things every day. For example, she repeatedly found different things in her shoes, from worms to glue. But Natalia didn't punish the children and patiently explained to them, "I won't tell about it to your father, because he works very hard and I don't want to make him nervous. But still, Alina, Vasco, please at least let's respect each other." The children, knowing that they would not be punished, agreed, but continued to make mean things. One day Natalia was cooking dinner. Bolívar was supposed to return from another trip that evening. Dinner was almost ready, but she suddenly realized that she didn't have the necessary seasonings, so she went to the store. But when she returned home, she realized what the children had done. There was no cooked dinner, all the pots and pans were empty and clean. And Alina, looking straight into her stepmother's eyes, brazenly said that Natalia didn't cook anything at all. "You must have thought about it, and then you fell asleep, and in your dream, you were cooking something." Tired Natalia would have believed her stepdaughter, but the children, who had thrown the dinner away, cleaned the pot, and even thrown out the trash from the bucket, forgot to throw away the rest of the ingredients. It was still in the fridge. That time the woman couldn't stand it anymore, and without raising her voice, she said, "So, that's it. When your father arrives, just tell him why you threw the dinner away. And I'm going home." Natalia stayed at work until the end of the day, and in the evening she really went to her mother and sister's house. She had to spend most of the weekend on the road, but she could no longer stay in the apartment with the vicious children. She didn't even understand why they were so cruel to her. Anna understood that her daughter was having a hard time, and she wasn't going to make the situation even worse by saying, "I warned you." On the contrary, she was glad her daughter had realized her mistake. But Lucila was more frank and straightforward. "No, Mom, there's nothing good in such self-sacrifice. Natalia will waste her best years on these children, but she will still be a stranger to them." Her sister persuaded Natalia to leave Bolívar and to forget about his family forever, but all her words were useless. All arguments failed. Bolívar came to pick up his wife on Sunday afternoon and firmly said, "Natalia, come back home." Alina and Vasco promised to stop their pranks. The woman believed it. Accompanied by the quiet sighs of her mother and sister, she returned to the city. Alina and Vasco really stopped doing horrible things. They were no longer rude to Natalia, no longer mocked her, and the woman was happy to think that the dark streak in her life was over. Now she had a husband and children, as that which doctor promised. And all her problems were just a bonus to the fulfillment of her greatest wish. Natalia raised Alina and Vasco as her daughter and son. The woman forbade herself even to think of giving up this difficult burden. They were not her biological children, but she was the one who sat by their beds at night when they had a cold, went to parent-teacher meetings, and helped them deal with all sorts of troubles. She wiped Alina's tears after her first love disappointment. Natalia even babysat little Milu, allowing her stepdaughter to get a college education. And now it turns out that none of them considered her a family member, and they didn't want her in the apartment they had all once been happy in. Or maybe she imagined that they had been happy. It was unfair, but the woman could not blame anyone but herself. Natalia rubbed her suddenly numb palm and thought about the past, afraid to even imagine her future. Maybe the perfect family existed only in her imagination? In the past, life went on by inertia, but now she had to figure out how to behave with Alina and Vasco. Natalia Gimenez knew herself and understood that she could not pretend. She would no longer be able to smile at her foster children, knowing they appreciated her no more than the rug on the doorstep. The woman had just lost her precious husband, and an overheard conversation between Alina and Vasco made her realize there was no more support, and she didn't know what to do next. The pain in her heart didn't go away, but the pill did have a life-saving effect. Natalia Gimenez's breathing became easier. But now she didn't even know how to go on with her life. Memories of the difficult past were replaced by anxiety about the unknown future. Vasco and Alina talked about the woman's home village. But Natalia had nowhere to go back to. Her sister lived in that house now with her family. Would they let her in? Would they let her stay there? After all, the house was not very big, and there wasn't much room. Natalia certainly didn't want to be a burden on her sister. The widowed woman was extremely uncomfortable. Natalia bitterly regretted that after her mother's death, she didn't communicate much with Lucila. Her sister always told the truth directly, even if the truth was unpleasant, but she always stayed by her sister's side. No matter what was going on, she always felt supported. Natalia always knew that they would give her the right advice and suggest how to fix the mistakes she had made. However, the woman had no idea how to fix the main mistake of her life. The sisters had always been friends, but one day they had a quarrel, after which they reduced their communication to exchanging greetings for the holidays. Natalia had quarreled with her sister because she couldn't come to her dying mother. That day Alina had gone into labor, and fearing the impending birth, she begged her stepmother to stay with her. Vasco, Bolívar, and even the father of Alina's child were there. But everyone distanced themselves from typical women's problems. Alina held Natalia's hand. Natalia could not leave her stepdaughter, even though she knew that she would not be able to say goodbye to her mother. Bolívar took his wife and daughter to the maternity hospital. Natalia spent almost 24 hours there, and after the joyful news of the birth of a baby girl, she rushed to the village, but she was too late. Lucila was angry and offended and scolded her sister. But then they hugged each other and sobbed for almost an hour. Natalia understood that Alina could stay in the hospital without her. The stepdaughter didn't even thank her. And Natalia could not forgive herself. She fussed over helping Lucila and felt guilty all the time. The tension in the air between the sisters led to conflict. Lucila rebuked. "You are so silly. Think about yourself. You have turned into a powerless servant. Bolívar and his children manipulate you. You couldn't even come to your mom. Your husband and his children knew your mother was dying, but they forced you to go to the maternity hospital with Alina anyway. Does the fact that you were in the maternity hospital make it easier for Alina? No, but this princess is just used to you doing whatever she says." Natalia tried to justify her stepdaughter, and after that, the sisters had a final quarrel and stopped communicating. A few years after the unpleasant scene, Natalia wrote a letter to her sister apologizing, and they began to correspond. However, their letters were short and brief, without any details. The sisters had only seen each other a few times in the past 20 years. It was because of the distance and the fact that Natalia was busy taking care of her husband, Alina and Vasco. She couldn't leave them even for a few days, especially since her stepdaughter and stepson were always having problems. And they couldn't handle anything without her. When everyone already had cell phones, communication became easier. But letters and paper postcards stopped going from the village to the city and back. Natalia came to visit her niece on her 10th birthday and then a couple more times. And now the woman regretted that all her life she had tried to be good to those who no longer needed her, but there was nothing she could do about it. She didn't want to stay in her late husband's apartment even for a day. Natalia Gimenez slowly sat up on the bed, listening to what was going on in the apartment. While the woman was immersed in her thoughts, the stepdaughter and stepson fell asleep. Slowly, trying not to make noise, Natalia Gimenez packed her papers and some things that were dear to her. Fortunately, there was a large bag in the room. She bought it once when she went to the health resort with Bolívar. Natalia Gimenez sat down at the table to write a note for Alina and Vasco, even though she knew that her disappearance would not upset them, but only make them happy. Carefully, trying not to cry and not to leave traces of her tears on the piece of paper, the woman wrote, "Alina and Vasco. I can't stay here. I'm going to the village. Goodbye." The unfortunate Natalia, who had become lonely and homeless overnight, found herself on the empty streets of the city at night. Some dog owners were walking their precious pets, taking a late-night stroll. Youths were lounging on some benches. But the woman fearlessly walked even past the noisy companies. She could not imagine anything more frightening than what had already happened to her. Natalia even thought that she wouldn't mind if her mediocre life ended here, on the streets of the city, where she was an unfortunate obstacle to the happy resolution of the apartment issues of her kids. But there was no trouble on the way to the train station, and there was even a cozy place for her in the waiting room. She did not even have to beg anyone to let her in. Natalia thought this was a good sign, but she could not sleep. As soon as the ticket office opened, she bought a ticket to the nearest station to her home village. Subconsciously, the woman wanted Alina or Vasco to call her, make excuses, or even ask her to go back home, and she prepared arguments for refusal. But no one called. At first, Natalia thought that Bolívar's children hadn't woken up yet. Then she, still trying to justify them, assumed that they just hadn't found the note and thought she went to the pharmacy or the grocery store and would be back soon. But no one called, neither in the afternoon nor in the evening, when the woman was on her way out of the city. And she finally realized, no one needed her. It hurt, but Natalia thought it was not right to cry in front of others. It was very difficult to forget the resentment. But the woman tried to push away all attempts to think about where and when she had made a fatal mistake. Long before her arrival, Natalia got nervous. What if her sister couldn't find a place for her in the house? For some reason, she didn't come to Bolívar's funeral and didn't even text her in response to the news of the man's death. The woman was too afraid to call and notify her sister that she was coming, and now she regretted it bitterly. What if Lucila went somewhere? However, she didn't have much time to think about it, because she was already approaching her village. Tired of nervous tension, the woman called a cab. Even though it was not the cheapest option, she wanted to get to her mother's house as quickly as possible. The driver took the passenger to the right house, and the woman watched for a few minutes the sister, who was cleaning the yard. Her heart raced again, and deciding not to hesitate any longer, Natalia opened the gate. The creak woke the dog sleeping in the shadows, and Lucila immediately turned around. When she saw her sister standing in the yard, she dropped the broom and ran to Natalia, as if there had never been a decade of separation between them. Lucila hugged and kissed her dear sister, and then whispered, "My little sister is here. Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" The warm welcome made Natalia cry. The older sister, who was also already crying silently, came to her senses and said, "Come inside, hurry up. Why are we crying outside?" Lucila did not ask any questions, knowing that Natalia wouldn't just show up in the village without telling her, and started to fuss in the kitchen. The younger sister started the difficult conversation. "Lucila, why didn't you come to Bolivar's funeral?" Lucila was shocked. "What do you mean, a funeral? Why didn't you tell me?" Natalia looked at her sister in confusion. They hadn't seen each other for a long time, but Natalia knew her sister. Lucila could be blamed for being too straightforward, but certainly not for her ability to hide her emotions or to fake emotions depending on the benefits of the moment. Now her face expressed shock. Natalia took out her phone to show the message she had sent and got angry with herself. The message turned out to be a draft. Lucila really didn't know anything about her sister's grief. Natalia sat down on the bench and burst into tears again. Lucila gave her sister a sedative and then took her to her bedroom. "You need to get some rest. I'll call you when I set the table." Emotional shock, which the widowed woman had to go through, was so strong that she suddenly fell asleep and slept for almost 8 hours. When Natalia finally woke up, the whole Lucila's family was already home, and everyone welcomed the relative very warmly. Vital, who had married her older sister, showed Natalia the house after renovation and the garden. Meanwhile, their daughter Casilda was hurriedly putting the delicacies prepared in honor of her aunt on the table. The woman had rested and was now pleased to note that they kept the best of her mother's house, and the added modern features made it more comfortable. Lucila was proud of her husband, her daughter, and the house, but she didn't want to hurt her sister and even seemed a little embarrassed about her happiness. When the sisters were left alone, Natalia shared her problem with Lucila, briefly describing the ingratitude of Alina and Vasco. "You see, it turned out that there was no place for me in that apartment. It's like I've turned into some old, unwanted furniture. It was needed once, but now no one wants it, and everyone wants to get rid of it. Perhaps I should have fought for my right to live in this apartment, where I spent more than half of my life, but after overhearing their conversation, I couldn't stay there any longer. I had never experienced such humiliation even from my first mother-in-law." Lucila cursed and advised, "Forget about all those scoundrels. You're home now, and no one will ever chase you away. Tomorrow we'll try to divide the living room into 2 parts to make you your own separate room. Everything will be all right. You're not even 60 years old yet. It is quite possible to start living your life the way you want, and not to please someone else." The sisters embraced and could have sat like that until dawn. But Casilda, who peeked through the door, advised, "It's time to go to bed." Natalia thought it was useless for her to go to bed after a long day's sleep, but surprisingly she fell asleep again. The woman started a new life. She easily recovered the memories of village life and rejoiced as she watched the plants give her beautiful flowers and tasty fruits in return for her care. Sometimes she thought about that ungrateful people, but gradually the burning resentment against Alina and Vasco cooled down. Natalia even wanted to call her stepdaughter several times to ask about Milu. However, the fact that the non-biological granddaughter didn't get in touch herself stopped the woman. So Milu didn't need her anymore either. The days passed, and Natalia anxiously awaited the approach of late autumn. For then the whole family would spend less time outdoors and would communicate much more. And the woman was afraid that they would start to quarrel. She tried to be as helpful as possible. And Lucila sometimes humorously complained, "Natalia, why are you acting like Cinderella? You never rest, always working, doing something. I even feel ashamed that you do all the housework now, and not us." Vital often jokingly asked her too. "Natalia, I feel terrible. People will say that Lucila and I have a slave. Every time we think of doing something, you've already done everything. I'm speechless. I'm very grateful to you, but I beg you, give yourself a rest. There's no need for these labor feats. Despite all her fears, life with her sister's family brought Natalia peace of mind. She filled each day with hard work and tried not to think about the ingratitude of the children and granddaughters she raised. Thanks to her niece Casilda's detailed explanations, the woman registered a social media profile, mastered the unsophisticated science of using them, and began to monitor Mila's life from time to time. Her granddaughter posted many pictures and short quotes. And through them, Natalia understood what was going on. The woman hoped that Milu would invite her to the wedding, but the granddaughter didn't even call her. The people Natalia had considered family for many years seemed to have completely erased her from their memories. But here in her homeland, the woman felt like she was at home. After the pleasant Christmas holidays, when the villagers visited each other according to the old traditions, her heart finally melted. Lucila was happy to see her younger sister smiling more often and not looking so confused and depressed anymore. It was very pleasant to see such positive changes. However, it was sad to see Natalia rushing to answer a call or message when she heard the phone ring. But each time she looked at the screen with disappointment because the names on the screen were not the ones she wanted to see. Obviously, she was waiting for calls from the people she had devoted her life to, but in vain. One day Lucila, her husband, and Natalia stopped by to visit their very old teacher. Despite her old age, the old woman was still very lively and had a terrific sense of humor. Thanking her former students for bringing goodies, the teacher suggested, shyly, "Guys, what would you say if I ask you to help me organize my anniversary? After all, I'm turning 80. The old teacher looked at the guests with hope in her eyes, and they answered together, without hesitation, "We will help, don't worry." The teacher smiled. "Oh, thank you so much. You remained the same kind and sincere children I taught in school." And they began to discuss the details of the party. Some ideas seemed good, some didn't, and they changed the original plan several times. While Vital fixed everything that required a man's strength, the three women made a list of who could be involved in organizing the party, and they made a list of the people they were going to call. Lucila immediately called her friend, who worked at the school, and after a short hello, she asked, "How do you think? Can we throw a party in the school building? We'll clean everything up after the party, don't worry about that." After a short conversation, Lucila smiled at her teacher and her sister. "No problem." Otilia even scolded me for the fact that we might have doubted her. "She was your student too, and she is willing to help in any way she can." The elderly teacher was happy. And Natalia finally had something important to do. She started by calling everyone whose phone numbers she, her sister, and Vital had. They couldn't find some people right away, and Natalia tried to find them through social media websites. Most of the former students, having heard about the upcoming anniversary of the person who introduced them to letters and numbers, did not hesitate to agree. It took a lot of effort to get Conrado's number, and as it turned out, a few months ago he decided to live by the warm sea, fulfilling his long-held dreams, and went abroad. One of the employees of his company lived in his apartment, and Natalia found out about it from this employee. However, the person she talked to flatly refused to give his boss's phone number. When she asked him to write down her contact number and tell Conrado that a former classmate was looking for him, he hesitated, and then he honestly said, "I don't think it's appropriate to bother the chief. If you want, I'll give your number to his deputy. They communicate almost every other day. I think if Conrado considers it necessary, he'll contact you immediately." However, Natalia didn't want to wait. She managed to find the contact of a former classmate. And even though the call abroad could seriously reduce the funds in the account, she dialed the numbers. Unexpectedly for Natalia, Conrado recognized her from the first words she said. Or maybe his employees warned him. Whatever the case, there was sincere joy in his voice. "Natalia! I can't believe my ears." The woman explained to the former classmate the purpose of her call, and he responded enthusiastically. "Of course, I'll be there." They chatted for about 10 minutes, recalling their wonderful school years, and then the man realized. "Natalia, I just realized that we are in different countries, and you will get a phone bill with a large sum." "Okay, bye. Now I'm going to book a ticket." The woman replied with a laugh. "Conrado, come on. There are almost 2 months before the teacher's anniversary." The man firmly said, "I heard your voice and realized I no longer want to relax here. I want to go to our village. Besides, probably my help will come in handy. Anyway, see you soon." The conversation with Conrado made Natalia feel cheerful, as if she had dropped the weight of her burdens. The quality of the telephone connection was perfect, and she could hear her former classmate as clearly as if he were in the next room. Soon her phone received a notification of a money transfer. It was her classmate who had sent her a compensation payment for her phone bill. Natalia shared the results of the phone conversations with her former classmates with Lucila. And Lucila noticed some excitement in Natalia. Preparations for the celebration were in full swing. And Conrado, who really arrived soon, helped a lot in many ways. He secretly paid most of the bills of the old teacher. Together with Natalia, the man drove to various stores. He agreed to go through several options so that all the plans would come to reality in a perfect way. Conrado realized that he still had feelings for Natalia, whom he had been in love with since childhood, but now he liked her even more. The man bitterly regretted that he was not brave enough to confess his love to his classmate and instead joined the army. Upon learning of Natalia's wedding, he fell into a long depression. Later, when he returned from the army and met Natalia, she was so overwhelmed by the failed marriage that she stubbornly rejected all his signs of attention. When Natalia started a second relationship, he was sent to work in another city. Upon his return, Conrado learned that Natalia had slipped away from him again. A wave of despair and anger flooded the man's heart. He was angry with himself and quickly quit his job, left his village, where everything reminded him of his unhappy love, and moved to the capital. He cured his broken heart with work and managed to build a business that began to bring in a consistent income after a series of ups and downs. Realizing that fate has given him the last chance, Conrado began to court his former classmate. Natalia was quite surprised when the man gave her flowers and confessed his feelings. "I always loved you, since childhood, but I didn't dare to tell you about it. I wanted to confess everything to you so many times, but I was afraid. I lost you twice. But I won't make that mistake again. Both you and I deserve to be happy." Natalia gently touched his forehead, as if checking the temperature, and said, "Look, Conrado, your head doesn't seem to be very hot. But you should check it with a thermometer. What makes you think we're going to be happy together?" The woman realized by the man's suddenly sorrowful face that she had offended him, but she did not apologize or try to rectify the situation. Later, when she shared the news with her sister, Lucila said, "Natalia, are you out of your mind? He's been in love with you since childhood, and he finally confessed it, and you still don't take him seriously? You've wasted your life on the wrong men, and you're refusing a decent man again. Come to your senses, don't do it. Give yourself a chance to be happy." Natalia tried to turn everything into a joke. "That's how you see it? Kisses and romantic dates instead of going to the hospital in our old age?" But Lucila ignored her sister's joke. "My silly little girl. I'm not going to push you, but if you think about it, you'll realize that you can't ignore a man like Conrado. He proved a long time ago that he can do anything. He made it from a simple tractor driver to an entrepreneur. He owns a company, actually. People say he owns several companies. You see, he can even afford a long vacation abroad. He was never married. He was probably waiting for you, and you were choosing some strange men. Natalia was not happy to hear her older sister rebuke her. But, to be honest, she knew her sister was right. Subconsciously, she was looking for reliable support but was constantly mistaken. Because she stubbornly and unfairly ignored the one who was there for her. Conrado had long ago sold his parents' house in the village and stayed at his friend's house. However, he met with Natalia every day, sometimes for organizational matters, sometimes he came to talk to Vital, and sometimes he cleverly set up supposedly random meetings in the store or during a walk. The woman had no idea her relatives were involved in the project to win her heart. Casilda was texting Conrado, informing him where her aunt was going. Lucila kept pointing out to her sister how fate was bringing her and her former classmate together. Natalia could see how affectionately Conrado was treating her. She was deeply ashamed of the fact that she had lost her husband not long ago, in the summer, and now, only 6 months later, she suddenly believed in the chance to become a happy woman again. Natalia was ashamed, and she didn't dare reciprocate Conrado's feelings, even though she felt something for him. The day of the teacher's anniversary was coming up, and everyone involved in the preparation of the party was ready. Vital took care of the transportation so that everyone who wanted to congratulate the teacher could easily get to the neighboring village, where the school was located. Although Natalia took part in decorating the hall for the party, she looked at everything as if for the first time. It was beautiful and very heartwarming. The anniversary party was in full swing, and most of the people present had already said congratulatory speeches in prose, poetry, and even in song format in honor of the teacher. Suddenly, Conrado approached the microphone again. After apologizing to everyone that he would be speaking on another topic, the man turned to Natalia. "My precious former classmate. In front of my friends and everyone here, I confess my love and ask you to give me a slow dance." Loud applause erupted, and Natalia could not refuse. One of the former students, responsible for the music at the party, was obviously aware of Conrado's idea because a nice slow song sounded almost immediately. Swirling around the hall in a strong man's embrace, Natalia relaxed and let her partner lead her in the dance. Conrado whispered sweet compliments to her, and then, as if casually, offered to marry him. The woman froze in surprise, but after a moment of hesitation, the man continued their dance. When the music stopped, Natalia stood confused under the gaze of her former classmate. She wanted to say yes right now, but she was scared and answered in a cliched, though not too sincere way. "I'm sorry, but I need to think about it." The man was not offended. He didn't want to push her, but he was encouraged to propose at the party by Natalia's sister, who thought that Natalia would be unable to resist in a relaxed atmosphere. Conrado regretted giving in to Lucila's entreaties, but correctly interpreted the sparkle in Natalia's eyes. He sensed that the woman liked him and understood that she needed time to mentally accept the possibility of a happy change in her personal life. The party went well but inevitably came to an end. One of the former students offered to walk the happy, but tired teacher home. And as she said goodbye to Natalia, the teacher whispered to her, "My dear, don't let your happiness slip away. Conrado is a good boy, don't lose your chance." Lucila with Vital and Natalia with Casilda organized the party, so they stayed to clean everything up and remove the decorations. Once again, Conrado's help came in handy. He explained simply, "I am in no hurry at all. I'd be happy to help you." Natalie glanced furtively at the man who was trying to do the cleaning harder than anyone else and thought that she had lost too much time in her life. By the time the company that had finished cleaning returned to their village, all the members were already yawning. Conrado went home. Vital, Lucila, and Casilda went to sleep. An anxious Natalia went to the World Wide Web for solace. She tried to read a book, but couldn't understand a word because her mind was occupied with other thoughts. Then she decided not to try to distract herself and opened a social media website. She was busy preparing everything for her teacher's anniversary, so she hadn't checked Mila's profile in a long time, and now she was shocked. All the recent posts of the non-biological granddaughter were filled with pain. Natalia wasn't just in shock. She reread it several times and was horrified. It turned out that Mila's labor was complicated, but she and her newborn son were discharged from the hospital almost immediately and were simply advised to go to the pediatric clinic for a checkup. Natalia looked at the list of diagnoses given to the baby and was horrified. Milu asked for financial help from everyone who cared. Natalia immediately forgot all the resentment that lived in her heart. The compassionate woman immediately decided to send financial help. However, after finding out how much money was required for at least the first phase of the surgery, her heart ached. The money she could give was just a drop in the ocean. Suddenly, Natalia came up with the idea of asking Conrado for help. Without waiting until morning, the woman quickly dressed and headed for the man. Natalia was in a state of shock, so she didn't think about embarrassment or anything else and just told about the girl's misfortune. The situation couldn't be worse. Her child urgently needs surgery. He has so many diagnoses that we can't wait. Her baby just doesn't have time. I couldn't even wait until morning. Please, Conrado, if you can, help Milu and her baby. Please, time is their greatest and most ruthless enemy right now. The man hugged Natalia and tried to calm her down. I promise, I will do everything I can. In the meantime, let me walk you home. It's cold outside, and I see you were in such a hurry that you didn't even wear something warm enough. Conrado kept his promise. By the next evening, there was already a post published on Mila's profile, thanking everyone who helped to raise the necessary amount of money. Natalia appreciated the generosity of her admirer, and instead of torturing Conrado with uncertainty, she told him that she had thought about the proposal and said yes. The man was incredibly happy, and he insisted to celebrate the wedding according to all the rules. Natalia tried to dissuade the happy fiancé. Conrado, are you kidding me? How can I wear a white dress with a veil if I'm getting married for the third time? Besides, technically, I'm in mourning. Conrado wanted to register a relationship with a woman he loved so long and faithfully, and he wanted to do it as soon as possible, but he agreed to wait as long as Natalia wanted. I won't rush you, but please don't marry anyone else. We have lost too many years. The woman shook her head. No, I'm wise now, and I won't make the same mistake as I did. Now I will only marry you. On the anniversary of Bolívar's death, Natalia went to his grave and was shocked to see how untidy it was. The woman sighed, cleaned it up, and on her way back to her village, she took advantage of the long waiting time at the bus station. She bought an envelope, notebook, and pen, wrote a letter, and dropped it in the mailbox there. When she was already on the bus, she regretted her impulsive act, but there was nothing she could do. A few days later, when the letter had traveled its intended route, Alina opened her mailbox to get her utility bill and found an envelope with no return address. There was her last name and two names, her and her brother's. The handwriting seemed familiar, and the woman opened the envelope in impatient curiosity. There was a short letter on a white piece of paper. Hello! I don't know who gets this letter, Alina or Vasco, but that's not the point. I think that whoever receives it, you will find a way to pass the information on to your brother or sister. I just wanted to ask you to take care of your father's grave. Also, I was going to thank you for not being a hypocrite after he passed away. About a year ago, I accidentally overheard your frank conversation, and I realized that I had completely failed in raising you. I tried to put my soul into you, to provide not only everyday comfort but also to teach you to be kind, merciful, and caring. Unfortunately, I failed to do that. So not having the right to live in an apartment that I had kept clean and tidy for 3 decades was the least of my misfortunes. However, I'm not angry, and I hope everything will be all right. Hug Milu and her son. Alina shuddered. She had found the letter in the morning and realized that Natalia had heard her conversation with her brother, and it hurt her feelings. She wanted to call her but didn't know what to say. Apologizing was silly and childish. Apologize and ask her to come back? Then how to solve the critical housing problem? She decided not to show the letter to anyone, tore it into small pieces, and threw it into the waste paper basket. Natalia never learned of the letter's fate. Soon she married Conrado and finally learned what it's like to live with a man who respects her opinion and listens to all her wishes. By joint decision, the newlyweds settled in their home village. Lucila was very happy for her sister, who had found her happiness through suffering, and told off her new family member. "Oh, Conrado, if you were more determined, Natalia wouldn't have to go through so many trials."
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.